Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're exploring, well, one of the most chilling events in modern history, Jonestown. You'll likely know the name and the date, November 18th, 1978. It was the day over 900 members of a group called the People's Temple died.
Uh-huh.
A mass murder, really, directed by their leader, Jim Jones, in Jonestown, Guyana. For many people at the time, the news was it was sporadic, shocking, completely bewildering. Most had never even heard of the People's Temple or, frankly, knew where Guyana was on a map.
Yeah, and the sheer scale, the suddenness of it all, it left so many questions just hanging there. How did this group of people, many of whom seemed, ordinary, how did they find themselves in such an isolated place, and how did it all end so devastatingly? So our deep dive today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the incredible, unsettling events leading up to that day. We'll look at who Jim Jones actually was, what drew people to the People's Temple in the first place, and crucially, how it morphed from what looked like an idealistic community into something horrifyingly different.
Right. Our mission today is to take this stack of sources we've gathered, articles, historical accounts, personal testimonies, and really distill the most important bits of knowledge and insight for you. Think of this as maybe your shortcut to getting informed about a really complex and often misunderstood piece of history. We want you to walk away with those aha moments, seeing the surprising facts, understanding the trajectory without getting buried in all the details.
Exactly. We'll trace the origins, starting with Jim Jones's peculiar childhood and his early influences, then through the temple's initial phase, which seemed genuinely progressive, actually, and then track that gradual tightening of control, the isolation in the Guyanese jungle. We'll show you not just what happened, but try to help you understand why it mattered, drawing directly from the source material for context. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really get Jonestown, you have to start with Jim Jones himself, James Warren Jones, born May 13th, 1931, Crete, Indiana. And our sources, they paint this picture of a childhood that was, well, frankly, pretty strange. He was heavily influenced by figures as different as Karl Marx, Stalin, Hitler, and Mahatma Gandhi. Quite a mix. What's really striking is how early he got this intense interest in religion, and specifically its potential power over people.
Yes, and it wasn't just books. As a kid, Jones was described as a social outcast, an unusual kid obsessed with death. Apparently, he'd hold funerals for small animals. Chillingly, one source mentions him stabbing a cat to death. His father was an alcoholic, a mystic fortune teller, and an open racist, which actually led to this major conflict with young Jim. His dad refused one of Jim's black friends' entry into their home. That early act of defiance against his father's racism, it sort of hints at a future paradox, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows that early, seemingly progressive stance that would, become a public hallmark of the temple, at least. His mother eventually left his father in '48, took Jim to Richmond, Indiana. He graduated high school there. The next year, 1949, he married Marceline, a nurse 4 years older than him. He kept studying Indiana University, then Butler University, got a degree in secondary education in '61. But his studies were interrupted because he started going to meetings of the local Communist Party in Indianapolis. So how did these two tracks, religion and communism, start to merge for him?
That's the key question, really. He became a student pastor in 1952 at Somerset Southside Methodist Church. And it was there, according to our sources, he observed that people with money are attracted to faith healing and such services. And these financial resources can be helpful in his goals. That observation, it really highlights his early grasp of leverage, manipulation, even as he was raising money to start his own church. He even tried some pretty unusual ways to fund it, like selling live monkeys door to door, alongside Bibles and encyclopedias, apparently.
The entrepreneurial spirit was definitely there. Wow, monkeys. And his initial commitment seemed genuine in his family life, too. He and Marceline adopted several kids from different backgrounds, Korean American, Native American, and later a black child, James Warren Jr., and another son, Tim Jones. They called themselves the Rainbow Family, which, for the time, that was pretty revolutionary. Then in 1956, he launched his own church. It eventually became the People's Temple Christian Church, full gospel, pointedly open to all races.
Mm-hmm. And looking at the context, this early phase of the People's Temple, it really did seem dedicated to social justice. In 1960, the Democratic mayor, Charles Boswell, appointed Jones director of the Human Rights Commission in Indianapolis. Our source notes he started integrating police stations, hospitals, churches, restaurants, real hands-on stuff. He even set up stings, sending black members in to catch places refusing service, then using political pressure to force desegregation. This was significant civil rights work, right, in Indiana during a really turbulent time.
That's incredibly impactful work, yeah. But imagine pushing like that, especially then, must have stirred up a lot of anger. Were there consequences?
Oh, absolutely. White-owned businesses, civic leaders, Apparently they hated him. There were retaliatory acts, a dead cat thrown into his house, a swastika painted at the church, dynamite thrown in a coal pile at the temple. So yeah, his humanitarian efforts, even with official roles, were met with serious, even violent resistance. This pressure, it seems, eventually led him to leave Indiana. In 1963, Jones moved, just temporarily, to Brazil as a missionary, worked in Rio's slums, and he explored local Brazilian syncretic religions, those faiths that blend different traditions like African spiritual practices with Catholicism.
So he was looking for maybe new spiritual angles, perhaps strategic insights too.
Precisely. But he came back to the U.S., reportedly felt the guilt of leaving behind the Indiana struggle of civil rights. Huh. When he returned, he relocated the whole operation to California, set up satellite branches of the People's Temple, San Fernando, San Francisco, L.A. This move west was absolutely pivotal.
Yeah, this is where his influence just seemed to explode. He got real political traction. He organized his followers to help the poor, the homeless, earned several humanitarian awards in Northern California.
Wow.
By 71, Jones's family and about 100 original followers settled outside Ukiah. Why? They believed it would protect them from a nuclear holocaust, which, definitely shows an early sign of that isolationist thinking creeping in.
It really does. And his political climb just continued. In 1976, Mayor George Moscone appointed him to the San Francisco Housing Authority. That shows how effectively he leveraged his community work and his growing flock. And during this time, Jones soon gained a reputation as a charismatic churchman who claimed to have psychic powers, such as the ability to foretell the future and miraculously heal those who are sick.
Right, and this is where it gets deeply unsettling, because those sick people, we now know, were actually perfectly healthy people planted in the audience to dazzle the crowds to entice them to donate money.
What does that tell us about the psychological grip Jones was already building? How did followers square what they saw with what they believed? Well, that early deception, it wasn't just about cash. It was about establishing Jones as, a supernatural authority figure. By staging these healings, he was creating this alternate reality where his word was law, making followers doubt their own senses, rely only on his interpretation of reality. It really laid the groundwork for the much more extreme control later on. And as you said, he was rubbing shoulders with some very prominent figures in San Francisco politics. Harvey Milk, the city councilman, even wrote a letter supporting Jones. Dianne Feinstein, future U.S. Senator, endorsed him. Willie Brown, future mayor, defended Jones as a man of highest character, even wrote to President Carter for him.
It's just astounding that so many powerful people either overlooked or rationalized the darker stuff that was starting to surface. What were those darker aspects even then?
Well, our sources are pretty clear. His psychopathic nature began to be revealed, as temple members were regularly humiliated, beaten, and blackmailed, and many were coerced or brainwashed into signing over their possessions, including their homes, to the church. Beyond that, Black members and other minorities were specifically told that if they left, they'd be rounded up into government-run concentration camps. The manipulation was becoming profound and terrifying.
That's horrifying. And the control, it sounds absolute. Family members were kept apart and encouraged to inform on one another. Reports started surfacing too. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, Jones's dodgy contacts with the Bay Area underworld. This brought the People's Temple under intense scrutiny. IRS, FBI started looking into them. This is when Jones started always wearing dark sunglasses, traveling with bodyguards, feeling the heat from the feds. He made a really drastic move.
Yeah. In 1974, knowing federal agents would soon be knocking, he relocated about 1,000 of his maybe 5,000 followers total down to South America. Created what he called a socialist Marxist workers' paradise in Guyana, away from U.S. jurisdiction, U.S. federal interests. And this settlement, of course, was named Jonestown, after himself. That physical isolation was absolutely crucial for maintaining his escalating control.
So once they were down there in Guyana, what did that complete isolation actually mean for the followers? What was the reality on the ground like?
Well, even before they got there, it came out that Jones had forced all temple members to sign over their wealth, everything, to fund the move. People sold their homes, emptied bank accounts, sold cars, gave every cent to Jones. And once they were in Jonestown, he forbade any contact with the outside world, tried to stop any messages getting out. This severing of ties, financial and social, it was a key step in cementing his power.
Just total control.
Yeah.
I imagine some people must have tried to get away, though.
A few disaffected members did manage to escape, and they told their stories. That's what really got the attention of federal agencies, and specifically Congressman Leo Ryan. To fight this growing image problem, Jones even hired PR people to push this narrative of a great conspiracy by intelligence agencies against the temple. But the reality in Jonestown itself was grim. Our sources, including a State Department report, describe members working incredibly long days in the fields. They faced harsh punishments just for questioning Jones's authority. Their passports were taken, medication confiscated. They were plagued by mosquitoes, tropical diseases. Armed guards patrolled the compound constantly. Members were pushed to inform on each other. Everyone forced to attend these long late-night meetings, their letters, any phone calls, all censored.
Sounds like a prison camp disguised as a utopia.
Yeah.
What about the Guyanese authorities? Did they have any oversight over this isolated American community?
That's a really important point about jurisdiction and maybe capacity. The State Department noted the local Guyanese administration exercises little or no control over the Jonestown community.
Right.
Why? Well, the area was remote and their own government machinery was already overstrained dealing with their own citizens. So basically, they had an understandable disinterest in bothering with this group that seemed self-sufficient. A U.S. Embassy cable from June 78 called Jonestown, a community of American citizens existing as a self-contained and self-governing unit in a foreign land. Jones had found his kingdom, totally unchecked.
And inside this isolated empire, Jones himself was just falling apart. Sources confirmed that by this time he was in declining mental health and addicted to drugs. He even had his own throne in the main pavilion, compared himself to Lenin and Jesus Christ. He became utterly convinced the government, the media, everyone was out to destroy him. And he started requiring members to participate in these terrifying mock suicide drills in the middle of the night.
Yeah, this paranoid state, it really set the stage for the final tragic climax. November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan travels to Guyana, a fact-finding mission. He's there specifically to inspect the People's Temple activities, the Jonestown compound itself, to investigate the rumors that some members of the cult were being held against their will, and that some are being subjected to physical and psychological abuse. His arrival was a direct threat to Jones's absolute control.
Ryan and his team arrived in Georgetown, the capital, on November 14th, then got to Jonestown on the 17th. Jones even hosted a party for them. Seems surreal now. But the very next day, November 18th, everything just exploded. Several temple members who were desperate to leave, they spoke to Ryan and his group, saw this as their only chance to get out alive. These members got on his delegation's truck to go back with him to the U.S.
But Jones wasn't going to just let them walk away. Not that easily. There's a physical attack on Ryan. First, someone assaulted him just for talking to the members who wanted to leave. The delegation left abruptly after that, taking 15 members with them. Other members attacked Ryan again shortly before the truck left, but he escaped unhurt that time. But Jones, following these protocols he'd apparently planned meticulously, he radioed his security team guarding the nearby airstrip.
And that's when the horrific attack happened. The truck gets to the airstrip. Jones' security team opens fire, just unleashes on them, gunfire everywhere. Ryan himself was killed. A reporter, a cameraman from NBC, a photographer from the San Francisco Examiner, and one female temple member who was trying to defect. All killed. 11 other people were wounded. Jones knew. He had to know these killings would bring in the military, the police. What happened next was just the ultimate horrifying manifestation of his delusion.
This is where those dark preparations, those drills, came into play. Our source states Jones then ordered his security team to dispense the punch they had made on his orders, the one they'd rehearsed drinking many times. This fruit drink, it was laced with cyanide, tranquilizers, sedatives, a lethal cocktail. It was first squirted into the mouths of babies using syringes. Then older children were told they were just drinking Kool-Aid. And finally, the adult members consumed it. Jones himself died of self-inflicted gunshot wound. They found him sitting on his throne.
The scale of it. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Fewer than 100 members survived. Either they defected that day or happened to be in Georgetown on temple business. Investigators later found a huge cache of firearms, hundreds of passports, $500,000 in U.S. cash right there, with millions more reportedly stashed overseas. The People's Temple basically just disbanded, declared bankruptcy by the end of 1978.
Yeah. Guyanese troops arrived the next day. The final death toll was put at 913 cultists, including 304 who were under the age of 18. Children. If you add the 5 people killed at the airstrip, the total number of deaths is 918. The imagery. It's just heartbreaking. So many people found with their arms around each other. Over 400 bodies were never claimed by family. They're buried together at the Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland, California, which is where many of Jones's followers were originally from. There's a memorial there now, unveiled in 2008.
And hauntingly, investigators found this terrifying audio recording of the final moments, known as the death tape. Jones's voice played over the compound loudspeakers as people were dying. You can hear him saying things like, "How very much I've loved you, how very much I've tried my best to give you a good life."
Mm.
But in spite of all of that, I've tried a handful of our people with their lives have made our life impossible. There's no way to detach ourselves from what's happened today. These recordings, plus over 1,000 others, his propaganda, conversations, sermons they painted, just a truly gruesome picture for investigators.
And in the aftermath, very few people actually face legal consequences. It's quite shocking. Only one person ever stood trial for any of the crimes committed. Temple member Larry Layton, for his role in the airfield murders. He was eventually found guilty of conspiracy and aiding and abetting the murder of Leo Ryan and the others. Served a life sentence but was released on parole in 2002. Another man, Charles Beichman, pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of a young girl who survived, and he served 5 years in prison in Guyana. That's pretty much it.
The ripple effects, though, they continue right to this day.
Yeah.
Especially for Jim Jones's sons, who survived only because they happened to be away playing basketball that day. They're still trying to find healing, forgiveness. Jim Jones Jr., who was interviewed years later for a documentary, said, "There's some things about Jonestown I'm never going to deal with, and I'm okay with that."
Mm-hmm.
He also offered this really profound warning: the mine's a dangerous neighborhood. Don't go alone.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen Jones, his other son, he also shared his pain. He said, "I often thought about what it must have been like for them, for us not to be there, and they asked their forgiveness." Stephen believed his father's initial purpose really was to bust down some walls and to create a community where all are welcome. But eventually it all became superficial. He stated flatly, "There was nothing spiritual about my father. His entire existence was superficial." Stephen recalled that as kids, they felt like everybody else had dad. We didn't have our father, and they were taking our father away from us, so there was that resentment as well. Both sons watched their father become more abusive, addicted to alcohol and drugs, a dangerous mix for what they called a psychotic personality. Stephen observed his father was more an actor than genuine almost always. He was always aware of eyes on him because all that mattered to my father was his perception of other people's perceptions of him. Chilling. So stepping back, looking at the whole picture, the story of Jonestown is just this stark illustration of how leadership, when it gets twisted and manipulated, can lead to such profound, unimaginable tragedy. We've seen how Jim Jones went from this, charismatic figure fighting for civil rights into a self-appointed messiah, hooked on drugs, drowning in paranoid delusions, whose whole life became, as his son said, superficial, just about perception.
Yeah, what really stands out to me from this deep dive is how even what seem like noble beginnings can be utterly corrupted, and how that gradual erosion of individual freedom, of critical thinking, can just pave the way for an unthinkable end. Hearing from Jones's son, still trying to heal decades later, it just underscores how the ripples of events like this keep going. And that observation that his personality was more an actor than genuine almost always, that feels key.
It does, and it raises this really important question for you, for all of us to consider. Our sources today state pretty directly that the example of Jim Jones should be used as a dire warning to all of us of the dangers of self-appointed messiahs and those who invoke supernatural powers. But okay, beyond the really extreme examples like Jones, what about the more subtle forms of persuasion, or unchecked authority, or even just our own deep-seated desires for belonging, for answers? What should we be vigilant about in our own lives, in our own communities? As Jim Jones Jr. put it, and it bears repeating, "The mine's a dangerous neighborhood. Don't go alone."